And we're ready to begin. My name is JC Thomas, the Assistant Director with Development Services, with a primary focus on our online permitting for our customers. Today's webinar, How to Apply for a Permit Online, Historic Designation and Zone History. I think you'll find it very interesting. It should probably take us about 30 to 45 minutes or so, and then have time for Q&A at the end of it. Please mute your microphone if you can. Use the chat feature or raise your hand to ask questions. Chat feature is really good because I've got a couple of my colleagues that'll be monitoring the chat and will help us go through those questions. There'll be additional time for Q&A at the end, should we need it. And then that's it. We'll go ahead and begin. What you're going to see is a couple of slides that I'm going to present on, and then I'm going to turn over the program to George Kasich. And George is going to do an online live demonstration on how to apply for a permit. And he's going to show you both of these two permit types. So you're going to see not only the zone history letter, you'll see the individual historic designation. By way of background, we've been at the online permitting transition for quite some time. Starting back in 2018, we had phase one, which included our no plan permits for mechanical, electrical, plumbing, traffic and transportation, and residential solar PV. In early days of COVID-19, we switched everything to online. And so we created this PTS hybrid version that relied upon our old PTS system, but used the Acela online application to accept documents. That was voluntary on May 4th of 2020 and mandatory July 1st. So everything became digital starting in 2020. Phase two included the standalone mechanical, electrical, plumbing permits, building, engineering, and discretionary. Those were all introduced last year through 2021. And then now we're in this phase three where we've introduced a historic, street tree, zone history letter, and an update to the transportation permit. Next coming is the preliminary review. We got some modular building, underground utilities, and then project contacts to wrap up our year. Some of the benefits, so more intuitive and easier for an online experience compared to our hybrid PTS system. Everything is in one location. It's all in the cloud, so it's using the Microsoft Azure cloud to help us process our plans and permits. The new online process will tell you what documents are needed. You can run reports when they review request documents to see what is requested of you. Everything's in one location with 24/7 access. So you can access the portal on the weekends or in the evenings or even on holidays and engage with the system. You can make payments. You can do all of those things that you used to have to come into the building to conduct a lot of that business. No more general application. At least that's one document that we're able to eliminate with the online process, that you no longer need a general application submitted. And then new customer user guides with step-by-step instructions on how to apply. And it's all based on the permit type that you have. Some of the things that I also wanted to point out is that the user guide will show you step-by-step with pictures on what to do and when to do it, how to create an account online, how to check your PDF files, creating a project, uploading documents, resubmitting documents, and then of course the final plans and receiving your permit and then scheduling inspections. So all of that is contained within our online user guide located on our website, that you can access that and follow along. One important aspect of online permitting, and this is true with virtually any electronic plan review software, is you're going to have certain requirements that you have to meet. And for us, it's using PDF files as opposed to maybe some CAD files or some other document files. We want those in a PDF format, and that way we can accept them in, we can review them in our software, and then provide comments back to you. And that way you can make the changes or corrections to your plans that are needed. We have a couple of requirements associated with that. One is the file size. 200 megabytes is our current limitation. It's actually quite a large file size, 200 megabytes. When you get beyond that, we've created some volumes if you do need volumes. And that's the only time you would actually use volumes in a set, if you truly have multiple volumes for like building construction plans. Otherwise, you want everything to be in one package in that building construction plan package for us. And page size, 8.5 by 11 up to 36 by 48. Be very careful about that, because while some pages or sheets might be 8.5 by 11, for example, some of the documents that we require that be completed and submitted. Your building construction plan should be a full set. So you always want to make sure that's the correct size. We've seen a couple of projects come through and they've been in the smaller 8.5 by 11. I think the customer meant to make them, 36 by 48. And so we've had to go back and correct some of those things. Page orientation is important, just as it was in paper. Although in paper, you could rotate them around by hand. In the digital world, we need to have them brought in the first time in the correct rotation with the sheet number at the bottom right-hand corner. That enables us to look at resubmittals and compare those, and makes it a lot easier, faster for our reviewers to conduct their reviews by having the resubmittal in the same format with the sheet number at the bottom right-hand corner as the first submittal. Password protection, that's another thing that we want to make sure that it's not password protected so that we can apply our digital stamp when we're ready to issue the permit. Annotations and comments, that's about flattening the file. So if you're creating a file in Bluebeam, or CAD is notorious for this, of having SHX text, you want to have that removed before you create your PDF file. If you've already created your file, there are steps to flatten that file and remove some of those annotations that may have been left on your plan. So that's really important. And then we have a Scout validation tool. And that Scout tool will check all of these things that I just mentioned and see if there's any, and tell you what the issue might be before you begin your uploads. And it's really important to check your files before you move forward with your application. So on to the new online permitting. These are all of the permit types that we have published today. So all the ones that I mentioned in my previous slides are here located. And the area in green is where you're going to find those new record types or those new applications. Individual historic resource nomination. That's when you're coming in and you're asking to have your property, your building designated as a historic resource. There's street tree. That's when you're asking to have a tree installed. Or there's zone history letter, where you want to get the history of zoning on that parcel or property that you're interested in. The others that are mentioned there, there's a few others that you can click on that radio button and you'll find things like mobile food truck or a zone use certificate for certain types of businesses that might be in a residential area. So keep that in mind. That's where the new permit types are. The rest of them you'll see going from the left, probably the most common one, like building construction. That's for any building construction that you might be doing. And then all the way down through the simple permits, grading and engineering, traffic control, et cetera. The PTS electronic submittal, that remains in place because we are still accepting submittals that are related to hybrid projects. If you had a PTS digital project, you're still using that application for not only if you're submitting for the first time, which hopefully you're not at this point, you're all submitting in the new permit types, but also for resubmittals, you have to go through that every single time. So keep that in mind. That's only for the PTS hybrid. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to George Cassique. Hopefully, George, you're ready to go, and we're going to apply for a permit online. And then, of course, we'll be able to answer any questions. George?
JC, thank you. And again, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar today so that we can go over some of these new applications that we're pushing out so that they're available online. So that said, many of you may be familiar with our current online permitting system if you work with other application types. If you do not, we'll go through and kind of help you understand how to get familiarized with the process from the very beginning, right? So what I'm going to do, and if JC, if you could just confirm once I share my screen that this will show up, that would be great.
Yep.
Perfect.
You're all set. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so again, for those of you that may not be familiar with our process, we've got a centralized location that we have put in a permit landing page where we've got all of our permits listed, or different application types, if you will, listed, where you can go and kind of, get the information as to how to go through and apply, what might be the necessary requirements that you need for submitting, right, documents, things like that, and kind of other resources. So to begin, you can go to our website for development services, and we've got under the most requested services section here on the main page, we have apply for a permit online. So if we go to that page, you'll see a list of all the different applications that we've developed and launched with our new online permitting system, similar to the list that you saw on one of the previous screens there. Everything from, an alternate methods and materials request to a demolition permit and so forth. So for today, we're going to be covering the live demo for two very simple applications, not the bulk of what we get, but still services that we offer. That's going to be the zone history letter and the individual historical resource nomination. Those of you that are familiar with these, you understand that they're pretty simple applications that somebody can submit. So the actual demos won't take very long. That's good. It gives us time for some Q&A at the end of the session too. So that said, I'll go ahead and get started with the first one. So that's going to be the zone history letter is what we're going to start with today. So if I were to scroll down to the bottom, as you can see, these are listed here in alphabetical order. We've got zone history letter, kind of gives you a quick blurb about what it is. But if you actually click on the link, it takes you to the actual permit page for that specific application type. Gives you a little bit more information. You've got some resources here for how to plan your project, right? And you've got an information bulletin that's related to zone history letter request. So you can definitely reference that as you're getting ready to submit your application. We've got applying for an actual zone history letter. As JC mentioned, we've been developing user guides. So we have a user guide that tells you how to apply for a zone history letter. And if you actually visit the user guide, you'll see that it's a little more encompassing than just how to apply for it. We've actually got a little bit more than just the initial application, right? Once you actually get into the review process, if you get different communications when something's been issued, or if you have a recheck required, meaning we need updated information. So this will kind of go through and walk you step by step with screen references that you can use to kind of help you understand the process, right? So it's a very good resource to use as you begin to use the zone history letter application. We've got some additional items here, such as checking your parcel number, right? Make sure that you're within the jurisdiction of San Diego. Things like the scout validation that JC mentioned earlier to make sure that your PDF, if you are submitting something and there's a submittal requirement for an application, make sure that it's been flattened. There's no annotations on it, things like that. We've got additional resources, again, the information bulletin, our ZAP portal, which also gives you some other basic information as to what applies to the property. But ultimately, what we're here for is if you're actually going to be applying for a zone history letter, right? So we do have a button here that you can click and it will take you to the login portal for your online permitting account. So this is the actual live production site here. For today's demonstration, I am going to be using our test environment, which is a mirror image of the production environment. So what you see here is what you'll see in your production account. So let me go ahead and log into this and we can get started with going through and submitting an application for a zone history letter. So for those of you that are familiar with the online permitting account, you kind of understand how to use it and where you can find certain things. For those of you that may not be, it kind of logs into your dashboard and then you have records, which is a list of records of things that you have previously submitted, and then your account so that you can actually modify your account preferences, things like that. We've got development permits up at the top here. And this is where it allows you to go through and actually create an application for a permit, if you will. So you'd go through and start the process. We do have a general disclaimer. Go through, read that, make sure you understand it. Certify, continue your application. And we get to this page where you actually make the selection of what application you're submitting. So as mentioned earlier, in this section under miscellaneous, we've got the two that we'll be covering today. First one being zone history letter. So I would make my selection and continue. And for those of you that know this application and have submitted these requests previously, you understand it's a very simple, straightforward application, right? You provide an address or a parcel. We then get that information and we look at the history of the site, anything that might govern development of that site, and we give you the information back. So that translates into quite possibly the simplest application we have in our new online permitting system, where you can go through and identify the address, let's say, or potentially the parcel number if you don't have an address of the site you're looking to inquire about. And ultimately, that's it. Similar to what JC mentioned earlier, that our general application was replaced and is no longer used, right? It's been replaced by a lot of these online permitting applications. What we used to have for the zone history letters was its own application where you would provide the information and then we would submit that. Well, that's the same case here, right? This new online application has replaced that form, that PDF that we had before, which we no longer need. So once you actually provide the address or the parcel number of the location you're looking for, ultimately, that's about it. The fact that you're applying through your account itself already gives us that information. So you submitting the application makes you the point of contact, makes you the applicant. So any communications that come from our end to you, once we actually receive this and we start processing it and doing the review, we've already got that link, right? It's submitted by the applicant whose account this is. So we've got their information and any communications go directly to them. You get a chance to just go through and review, make sure you provided the right, address. Again, we do have another kind of self-certification at the end that you want to go through and read. Make sure you check the box to agree that you have read and understand the certification. You can then hit continue application. And you've got an application submitted for a zone history letter. It will identify your record number here, so you can keep that for reference. That said, it may take a little bit here, so I'm going to give it a little bit of time, and in that time, we'll see if we have any questions. But as part of our new application for a zone history letter, similar to what we used to do before, we would charge the review fee up front before it would go into review, right? So now that we've launched this new online application for that service, that process has been automated. So when you actually submit an application for a zone history letter, it does come to us on the back end for this online permitting system. However, we can't start processing it until the payment for the review is first made. So we've added some scripting into our system that when you actually submit this, you get an email as the applicant letting you know, we received your submittal for a zone history letter. Here's your record number. So it identifies this record number again. And it also identifies that before we can begin the review, that you do need to pay for the invoice first so that it can actually allow us to start working on your request, right? So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get that email to come up. I'm going to refresh my email and just show you guys what that looks like so that you're somewhat familiar with it and know what to expect. In the meantime, do we have any questions? I see some questions coming up in the chat. Not sure if any of my associates have been able to answer those in the chat.
Yeah, George, maybe you can answer this one. What's the review turnaround time for a zone history letter?
Zone history letters. So the review turnaround time for a zone history letter, I believe, has always been established at 15 days. That's our goal, and we try to do our best to stick to that. With recent times, we have experienced high volume workload with some, short staff as well. So those due dates may get pushed a little bit, but we do our best to try to meet those due dates. So for zone history letter, we've established a 15-day turnaround time.
Is there an express on that, or is it just submitted 15?
Unfortunately, there's no express. It's just submitted 15 days.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then how about the fees? There was a question about the fee for the zone history?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I while we wait to see if I can get that email and show you guys what we're looking at, we actually, for the zone history letter, we've got the information bulletin that you can reference, and this identifies the actual fee. So we're looking at $869.07 is the fee that's established for a zone history letter request.
Great. And I'm sure you know the answer to this, George, but how can the owner, property owner, I'm assuming, pay the invoice if the architect is an applicant?
If the architect is an applicant. So we do have multiple options for payment. One of those being directly through your online permitting account. When fees are due, it will actually show you on the list of records for your records that you've submitted that fees are due. So it would look something like this. Here's that record that I just submitted, zone history letter, pay fees due. Obviously, if this is the architect who's submitting it, they're the applicant, you can pay it through here.
And we did set it up, George, so that it is open access, so that if, let's say you're the architect, George, and you want me to pay the invoice, all you have to do is send me the PMT number, or if it's a PRJ number, and I could go look that up myself, and the pay fees due link will be there. And I could go online and pay the either electronic check or credit card. We also offer, I don't know, George, if you're aware of this, but we're now offering in-person payment services by appointment so that you can reserve a time. I mean, it's convenient for you as a customer to be able to pick and choose the time you want to come in and pay. You can just go onto our website and grab an appointment, and it takes all, 15 minutes to come into the building and pay. But we want to make it as easy as possible online. And so that's why we created open access, so that anyone has the ability to pay for anything.
Absolutely, JC. So yeah, so like JC mentioned, without necessarily having an account, if you go just to the online permitting login page, you don't necessarily have to log in, right? If you don't have an account, you can do a search specifically just for this record right here, like JC mentioned, and the pay fees option should be there. So you can do this if you're the property owner who necessarily doesn't have an account. It's still available for you to pay, and some of the other options that JC mentioned, of course. I'm not sure if we have any other questions, but if not, I do have the email that I can show you a sample of, so you see kind of what you might be getting. And it does identify that the invoice does need to get paid before we can start processing the submittal request. So this is my email here that I received, identifying that it's a new submittal for a zone history letter. I have an actual invoice attached to that you can reference if you want to open that up. It gives you the record number, what type of submittal it was, and it does identify that before we can begin processing the application, the attached invoice does have to be paid. So again, this kind of replaces what you used to do manually before, where you would submit it, we would then give you the invoice, you would pay it, then we would assign it to staff for review. Now all that's been automated, so you get your email shortly after submitting the application. You can get it paid hopefully within 5-10 minutes. It goes into review. So much, much more streamlined, I would say. Unless we have any other questions in the chat or questions that people might have, that covers zone history. Again, it's a pretty simple, straightforward application. Doesn't take a whole lot. Yeah.
Hey, George,
good, George.
There's a couple questions, JC, I think that you might have skipped or you might have covered, but one of them was for you actually. Is are there any limitations to having letters at the end of a sheet number, i.e. A101A? There was nothing noted about this that I saw when you were talking about the plans and submittal. Question was from Sarah McAllister.
Yeah. Oh, so the question has to do with what is the proper formatting for the sheet number on the plans. So on our website, on all the permit web pages, we do reference and have in the user guide for those sheet numbers what they should look like. We want them to be as clean and simple as possible. But you can have letters and numbers combinations. But when you start adding in words like sheet 1 of 5 or 1 of 30, that's what we have trouble with in reviewing the sheet numbers. So just make sure you keep that box as clean as possible. And And you can have a combination of letters and numbers. You know, you can have like P1 or S-08 or L-2.03. But what we're looking to avoid is a lot of text or copy around that sheet number. And we're encouraging everyone to use, we have a chart that has a standard CAD chart, you know, that uses A sheets, B sheets, and C and so on. A for architectural, B for building, C for civil, E for electrical, as a standard format. So that also helps. Anything else, Scott?
No, that was it. There were some questions in there about cash payments are not currently being accepted, just to clarify.
Okay.
And I will put a link to the business hours, but everybody should be going to the virtual appointment page to make in-person payments. That is how you make it. You can't just show up and make a payment without an appointment, just to clarify. Some of the, did we get the question about how can the owner pay the invoice? Oh, yes, you got it. Sorry. That's it. Those are most of the questions. Can you show us an example of a zone history letter? That's one of the questions just popped in.
We probably could, Scott. I don't know that I have one queued up at the moment, but I could probably get one while we go through the next application and see if we can have a sample of one towards the end of the webinar.
Okay, then another question is, or for you, George, or you, JC, is when will you have your provided template in CAD? It is only in PDF. I think they're asking is, can they provide a template in CAD, or do we have a template in CAD? It's only provided in PDF.
We currently do not have one for building construction, but it's something that I know that the team is working on producing. So I don't have a time frame for you, but I'll certainly let everyone know when we have it ready to go and post it on our website. We do have them for engineering.
That's the last question right now.
Okay. So George, why don't you go ahead and try to go through the historic designation. I will look for a zone history letter.
I've actually, I think I may have found one, JC.
Oh, good. Okay.
Let me see if I can, let me just see if I can pull this up really quick. And we will throw it up on the screen so that people can see what a zone history letter looks like, which is, again, this is what we provide back to the applicant who's requesting, right? Information about a specific site, if you will. So let me see if I can pull this up, and I will pull it up on the screen here and show you all what we're looking at. Apologies, my system's being a little bit slow today, but we've got it up here. So when you actually submit a request for a zone history letter, you'll get something back that looks very similar to this. Again, it's identifying, it's a zone history letter for a specific site, right? Address, parcel number. We'll provide the project number under, or the record number in this case, under which we're reviewing it, address it to the applicant, whoever requested it, and then go through and kind of lay out you know, everything that applies to the property as far as the zoning, any overlay zones, history, right? If there's any development permits that govern the property, or if it's under just citywide base zone regulations, things like that. So that's, yeah, that's an example of what you would get in return.
Thank you, George.
Absolutely. Okay, so then we will continue on to the next application covered under this webinar. That's going to be the individual historical resource nomination. So again, similar to the zone history letter, you know, for many of you, the right place to start would be on our permit landing page. Again, if you're on the development services website, you can go to the most requested services here on the main page, apply for a permit online, and then scroll down, find the application you're looking for, and go to that site, which gives you a little bit more detailed information, right? So again, plan your project. We have provided guidelines and requirements when you're going through and putting a report together, which is the kind of the submittal requirement, if you will, for this application type. Again, similar to the other ones, got the user guide, which gives you the step-by-step on how to apply. And when you get different communications back throughout the process, right? If there's a recheck required, when something has been scheduled to go to the Historical Resources Board for a hearing, and it kind of provides the how-to of how to go through and process what you need to do on your end. Again, some of the other items that we have that are similar with many of our other applications, right? Requirements for PDF files, a link so you can validate your actual PDFs through Scout, make sure there's no issues. The apply for a permit, and then some additional resources, right? Information about Mills Act, if that's where you're going with your application moving forward, things like that. So I will go ahead and go into the actual demonstration of how to submit an application for an individual historical resource nomination. Again, you would likely click on here. It would take you to the production account for your online permitting account. But similar to the zone history, we're going to be going through the test account here, which again is a mirror of what you'll see in yours. So you would go through and log into your actual account. Once you've logged in, similar to the other one, you would go to the development permits tab at the top, where you have the option to apply for a permit or submit an application, right? Just like all the other ones, we have a general disclaimer that you have to accept before you can continue. Then you would go into the miscellaneous applications. As we identified earlier, we've got the individual historical resource nomination. So you would make your selection, continue. And just like most, one of the very first things we ask for is a location, right? An address or maybe a parcel. We need to know exactly what site we're looking at. So you can go through and go ahead and provide your address or APN. If you hit search, you can tell that it automatically fills in the rest of the information, just like it does with all of our other applications. Once you've provided an actual location, you continue the application. And this is a little bit more detailed because we do need some more information. Still relatively simple, right? So you identify what resource type you're nominating, right? So commercial, residential, or other. If you do select the other option, it does give you an additional field where you can provide in some information as to what exactly, what type of resource, right, you're going to be nominating, if you will. And again, this is only required if your selection is other. If it's commercial or residential, not necessarily something that you have to provide. You can identify if you're going to be submitting a Mills application. Once you've completed the nomination, if it gets designated, you can say yes or no. Date of construction, you put something in. If you know the architect or builder, you can put that in, right? Maybe you know who the original architect was, you can provide that information. And that one is optional. As you can see, it does not have an asterisk. So you can provide it if you have that. And then also if you're going to be nominating any interior elements, right? You can say no if there aren't. If it's yes, however, similar to the other resource type, we do have an additional field where you can provide some more information as to what exactly you're going to be nominating or including in your nomination. You provide that information. You then identify what designation criteria you're submitting your nomination under. It's limited here to the information that we have. However, if you're new to this process, we do have these little question marks that provide you some additional information for each one of these, right? So for instance, for criteria A, it kind of tells you exactly what this entails as far as nominating something under the specific criterion, right? So you can go through and kind of read as necessary to make sure that you're making the correct selection if you're a little unsure. So it does provide one for each one of these. And please note that this is a multi-select option. So you can select more than one if you are nominating something, a specific, property or building under more than one criteria, right? So you can select as many as apply. The requirement being that at least one does have to be selected before you can continue the application. So for purposes of this, let's just say I'm selecting A and E. I can then continue my application. And if for some reason you don't select one and you hit continue, the page will give you an error message identifying that you need to select at least one. Once you get past that point, you get into the actual documents that need to be submitted. So we have a historical evaluation report that needs to be provided for this. You can go ahead and click the add button, and it gives you just the typical Windows search so that you can go through, find the specific document you're looking for. In this case, I have a test document identified here. Let's say a report for our Development Services Office, 1222 First Avenue. I can go ahead and select that. And this is actually being Scout validated here, and it checks through to make sure that you're good to go. If there was any issues, it would identify it in red, letting you know that we have issues. And that's particularly why we provide the Scout validation option, you know, on the permit landing page, so that you can kind of go through that process before you get here and hopefully identify any issues that there might be so that you can get it sorted out before you actually get into applying. But hopefully by this time, you've got that good to go and your documents don't have any issues, and you can go ahead and submit them and continue your application. Just like all of our other applications, we do have a review page where you can go through and just make sure the information you've provided is correct to the best of your knowledge, right? Otherwise, you can go back and modify it. But yeah, basically just identifying everything that you've submitted, the document that you provided, and then just like all the other ones, we do have a final certification. So go ahead and read that, make sure you understand it, check the box, and continue your application to submit. As with the zone history letter, you are going to get a permit number that you have to reference as you go through and actually work with staff to process this application, right? I will show you that every time you submit a new application, if you go back to the homepage in your account and you go to my records, again, just like all the other ones, it'll add, right, another application. So in this case, it's 6611 here, individual historical resource nomination. This one is in queue. So unlike the zone history letter, this one is not automatically invoiced. We've identified the need for staff to kind of pre-screen these applications, make sure that they can do a completeness check and identify whether it's complete or not, to really put it into a substantive review, if you will. That way, if it isn't, we can ask for your report to be revised. Otherwise, if it is and your report is substantially complete, that we can put it into a review, then staff will add the applicable fees and manually invoice that, and you'll be notified through an email, all linked through your account, which you can then pay the fees for, just like we covered earlier in the webinar with the zone history letter as well. Again, these are pretty simple, straightforward applications. Not a lot to these, but if you do work with these, you know, hopefully this was informative enough so that you can understand how the process works. And again, we've got the permit landing pages back on our website that you can visit, and kind of gives you more of the detailed information for each step. So that said, next, we're going to have one of our senior planners here with our historical resources section, Suzanne Seeger. She's going to be providing a little more information on the historical resource nomination, not necessarily from a system processing standpoint, but more from a subject matter expert, if you will, how to go through and look at these, kind of the timeline, things like that. So that said, I will turn it over to Suzanne.
Thank you, George, for the excellent presentation. And George has been incredibly helpful with setting up this whole process. But I just want to clarify that this is only for nominations for properties to get designated. This is not for reports that are associated with projects or that already have a preliminary review. So this is a separate process. And this is taking the place of a process in which we currently have, applicants come in and physically submit reports and checks. So this is a way for the city to, more easily take in your reports digitally and then provide you with an invoice, and you can pay from the comfort of your home. So as George mentioned, you're going to submit the report, and then staff is going to do an initial completeness check just to make sure the report, there's no glaring issues with the report before we charge you, because we don't want to take your money if we see a major problem. So we're going to do that, and then you're going to be able to be invoiced, and that should be a 10-day turnaround time. So that should be fairly quick. The next process is staff is going to review the report. We have 30 days to review it. We're going to provide you with feedback immediately. Previously, in our current system, what we have is you sit in a queue for a year, and then you get feedback from the board, from the staff. And then you might have to revise your report, and then you get put back at the end of the queue. So, it might take you 2 years to get to the board. We don't want that. We want to streamline the process for everyone, make it quicker. So you're going to get more feedback up front. If you need to make changes to your report, if you need to make changes to your property in order to gain that historic designation, you can do that up front and resubmit. So you're not sitting in this waiting game, waiting for staff to give you feedback. So we're hoping that this is going to make the process faster for everyone. And then, am I missing anything, Mr. Thomas or George?
Suzanne, this is Scott.
Hi, yeah, Scott.
To clarify, when you say 10
Yeah.
and 30 days, are they calendar days or are they business days?
Business days, I believe. Business days.
That would be correct. Yeah. And actually,
you.
Suzanne, I'd like to just add one kind of modification to that. So the initial review for one of these has been established, I believe, at 42 business days, right?
Oh, thank you.
So we have
Sorry.
a 42 business day turnaround on the initial review, give staff a little bit more time. And then if there's any kind of initial revisions required, any sort of resubmittal is where I believe we've established either 30 or 28-day turnaround time. And again, these are all business days.
Yes, thank you, George.
Holidays not included.
Yeah. And Terry, I know in the chat, she asked if the at-a-glance form, which is currently something that we require on the reports, if this takes the place of that. No, you're still going to have to do the at-a-glance form. The questions that you're answering in Estella are going to help us with tracking and just data management for staff. And I think that's it, unless there are other questions.
Great, Suzanne. Thank you.
But the one question just came in, JC. How can we remove old projects in our records that are abandoned?
So currently you can't. That's something that we're going to be looking at because we've had requests from that. So if you could just please ignore them and let you know that we're working on a solution, because it's something that's come up from other agencies, such as the city of San Diego, that also have the same situation with a project that maybe it was withdrawn or canceled, and then it's still in your My Records tab. So that's something we'll be looking at for a future enhancement. I'm going to go ahead and share. George, are you all done?
JC, yes, I am all done. I can stop sharing and hand it back over to you.
All right, I'm going to pull something up on my screen just to share. And this applies to, give me just 1 second. This applies to all of our permit types, okay? So give me 1 second. Can you see that, George? Is it coming up?
Yep, we have your screen up on the screen.
So like George, I'm in our test, we call it our test environment. This is where we go in every day and we're checking on different changes that we might want to make, or configurations for our permits or fees or what have you. And so we go in here and do our testing before we enter into production. This is a demolition permit. It's in review, as it says here, in review. If it were a recheck required, it would say recheck here, and that means that we're asking the customer to provide something back to us. And so that's a notification you got in your email inbox, and also the status. Under the processing status, also very important to keep an eye on, you can track your project in this manner by using these drop-down triangles, and see what's happening with each review discipline on your project. So you'll always have like the reviewer staff name that's populated here. If you don't see a staff name, that means it hasn't been started yet in the system. Once it has, you're gonna see that name revealed. And this goes all the way to closeout and even through the inspections, which you'll see right here. Up at the top, there's a tab called Reports. And it's important to be familiar with this tool because you can run reports. For example, if you have a recheck required and you've been asked to provide some documents back to us, you're going to want to run this report called required submittal. And that report, and this will have nothing because it's not in a recheck status, but it would have the documents listed right here. And sometimes a reviewer or more than one reviewer will ask for the same document. We're not asking you to upload it, 3 times if we need building construction plans, just one time, but it tells you who, which reviewer had requested that document. So this is a really good report to run and be familiar with. There's another one I wanted to show you, and it's called Project Review. This gives you even more detail about your project, including what documents have been submitted. So as you can see, this is the project review. It shows you the document name that was submitted and its status, and then it has all the reviewer disciplines listed on this report and who requested. In this case, because we were doing a test, George, it looks like you did all the work on this one. And it would tell you if there's any status that's been completed, the status date, and so on, including fees. So it'll have the fees populated down here below. Again, this is a really important report that if you're sharing it with your customer, your client, you can email this as a PDF file out to other parties to your project. So those are a couple of important things that you could run. Invoices is another one. If you want to run the invoice, keep in mind that when we email the communications, they all go to the applicant who created the project to begin with, including things like invoices. So you're going to receive those as an email. You should have them, but you can also access them in the system. And then when you go to make the payments, it's under the payments tab. In this case, there's no fees, but as George was showing earlier, they would have a highlighted hyperlink. Now, all you need to do is send to if it's another customer of yours, a homeowner, property owner, send them the project number or the permit number. The PRJ stands for project, the PMT stands for permit. We separate those by function within the online permitting system. Project is what's coming in the front door for maybe a large building construction project. And then what we're going to do is add a permit associated with that project. And that permit might be, in the case of a single dwelling unit, a combination permit. And they'll have all your inspections associated with that combination PMT. And it's important to have that PMT number. And then for more complex commercial type projects, you'll have multiple PMTs. You might have one for an electrical, mechanical, and a plumbing one, all 3 separate. One for the building, that's a PMT. You may have one for fire. So keep that in mind. Those are the separations between the two. The project is used for us processing the reviews. The permits are used for us processing the inspections, and the fees are associated with the PMTs are for inspections. The fees for project are for projects. So in the attachments tab, if for some reason you're on our system and you see no attachments tab, that means you're not logged in or you're on a project that you don't have access to. And if you think you are supposed to have access to, you can call us and find out what's going on with that project. So that can happen. Applicants can change, points of contact can change on a project. We have processes for that on our website. You can submit forms to make those requests and changes. I think that's it on what I wanted to show you for the Acela. I'll go back to the slides, George, and we'll wrap things up. I wanted to point out we have a customer service center at Development Services. 619-446-5000 is our main phone number for DSD. It is a new Amazon call center that we deployed back on July 11th. I would encourage customers to use that if they need general assistance. We have a lot of options and services within that and some recorded messages and instructions on how to use the system. We have in-person appointments for records. And I mentioned payments. We still have a few paper plan pickups that we conduct here at Development Services. All of those can be scheduled online. You book an appointment online. And then we have virtual appointments. We have a vast array of virtual appointments that you could schedule today. Anything from a new project setup or permit issue, or if you want to have a 15-minute conversation with a planner and talk about your project. Doesn't cost anything. They're all available. They use Microsoft Teams in the Microsoft Bookings program, and it's a great way to share information. I know our structural team, they're actually using those for rechecks. So if you have a project that's in review, our structural reviewers are asking to book those rechecks by appointment. And what that means is you get a 30-minute session with your structural reviewer to go through any of the changes before you resubmit to them, so that you make sure that you've got all the corrections in. So those are great great services that we offer. Again, all using Microsoft Teams. There's no cost associated with that. The Microsoft Teams application is free to download. It doesn't require any expense on the part of the customer. And here are the appointments that we do have: planning and zoning, no plan permit and resubmittals, downtown planning and zoning, engineering, historic, first contact assistance, landscape, structural, traffic control, new project applications, permit issuance. And I mentioned the records and payment. So definitely take advantage of those services. And with that, Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you to see if there's anything in the chat that we need to address.
Yeah, there's a couple questions here. One question is, who do we contact if the project is completed, but there's an inspection that didn't clear?
Well, you would contact your inspector and clear that. You should have your designated inspector that was assigned to the project, and you'll see it on the system. You'll see their inspector's name, and you should be able to reach out to that inspector and get that final inspection cleared if you need that.
Okay. The other question is, or comment is, so DSD is no longer answering the line in-house. Also, we have had issues with not receiving callbacks.
So we did implement a new, it's called Amazon Connect Call Center. It's the technology that the city chose for all city departments. It's not just the development services. So keep that in mind. It's new to the city this year, and we're still working out some issues. If you call the 446-5000, you should be able to get a live agent. If you're unable to get a live agent, you can wait on hold if there's no one available, or you can request a callback. We've had some issues where calls, customers have said that a call's been dropped. If you do hear that or you have that happen to you, please report that to us. We put that into our Department of IT to work out any of those issues and continue to address any system problems that we might be having. But we are answering literally hundreds of calls per day between us, our code enforcement, and Ridgehaven. And we're also doing callbacks, not in the hundreds, but it's over double digit every single day. So we have agents on during the business hours, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. If you're having an issue related to your review, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to your reviewer. That's important. If it's one of the disciplines that you didn't see something on the plans, or they saw something and had a comment, and you're having an issue with that, their email and their phone numbers are all deployed in their project review comments, and you should be able to reach out directly to them. And that's important too, that you get to them as quickly as you can so that you can resolve that issue and not have to wait in some other queue just to speak to your reviewer. Anything else, Scott?
From Sarah, how long does it take to get a response for a request for permit application extension, Form DS 4102, emailed to required email?
Those should be handled within probably two business days. If you're having any issues, you could reach out to myself or Leslie Gallagher, Development Services, to help address any issues there. So that should be within a couple of business days.
Okay, there's a follow-up question. Who do you reach out to when you have a project that has not been assigned to structural and it's over 3 months delayed?
Those are running oftentimes up to even 14 and 16 weeks. It was at 12 weeks based upon the demand for submitted projects. I would encourage you, if you have a big project, to process those through Express if it's available to you. So that would be for the non-residential. And if you run that report, you might see a structural reviewer assigned to the project when I was showing you how to run that report. But it's just the nature of the situation that we've been in for the last couple of months and most of this year, where we've had an excessively high volume of permit applications, and structural is one area where they continue to see a high demand for the number of reviews and resubmittals, rechecks as we call them.
Okay, thank you. What's a typical turnaround for review?
Well, it depends on that all depends on the type of permit application and review disciplines. We have some standard review turnaround times that are in our system that we've had over 30 years of experience. And We had it from our old system in PTS. So some review times are 5 days, some are 10 days, some are 15 days, some are 20 days, and so on. It just depends on the type of application that comes in. We have something called rapid review as well. So those are for simpler projects, things like maybe just a simple electrical permit for a commercial building, or maybe you have a swimming pool that's using standard drawings. Those rapid reviews, you have the project intake time, and we have currently somewhere around, I think it was 13 days on intake, or maybe it's 12 days. We update that weekly on Fridays on our website, so you can see what the intake time is. We have the review time, which rapid review can be up to about 5 days. And then you have the permit issuance, which you can book an appointment for and pretty much get the permit issued within a day or two if you're ready to pull that permit. So good news on that front.
Thank you.
Please check our website on Fridays, Friday evenings, when we update the numbers. We started publishing those at the beginning of this year when we saw a surge in permit activity associated with, I guess you could say, the economy and sort of this post-COVID drive for building construction.
Yep. You're getting a lot of these questions. So somebody already posted Sarah McAllister posted the link in the chat to the processing timeline, so you can get a sense of
Thank you.
permit types. They are asking for email addresses for JC and Leslie. I believe you're going to have that at the end of the slide, JC. Or
you know, I don't have those, but I can certainly put them in the chat. They're also available on our website. So you can look at under the contact us, and you'll find everyone at Development Services on our website, including their name and email. But let me put it into the chat so you have my email address.
Okay, and then as you're going there and typing that question or comment, plats and legals for a CIP project. I'm not sure if that's what they were referring to. You can unmute yourself, Diluvan, if that's your question. But, no, just saying thanks. Okay, I guess those are most of the questions there, and I'll put a link in a second to how to get to the contact us.
Oh, that'd be great, Scott. Thank you very much. Yeah, definitely put that onto on the chat. Okay, well, we're going to conclude our presentation. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us during your lunch hour, and we appreciate you what you're doing for the city of San Diego in terms of building construction. And look for more webinars. We'll have more like this. We have a couple of more permit types coming. Preliminary reviews and the multidiscipline preliminary review are coming very soon. And we'll be presenting on those hopefully in November.
Okay, one last question, JC, if you have, does rapid review cost in addition to regular fees?
No, it's a short turnaround time and there's no added cost. It's the standard review fees that are set up at the time of application.
Okay, that's the last question. Thank you, JC.